Hi, in this episode or this webinar, what I'm going to do is go through some of the economics multiple choice questions that you're going to be looking for in your exam. So what I have is a 2012 summer paper, and we'll look through how these answers are got through examining or explaining some of the principles of microeconomics. So I'll get a little bit technical, but hopefully I'll make it clear cut, and it'll take maybe 30, 40 minutes. There are 20 multiple choice questions. So I'm going to just share the screen and explain and elaborate on some of the points. Okay, what we have here is section A of an exam paper. And what is shown is that you will be given 20 questions and each is worth 2 marks, so a total 40 marks. So take it that you'll be spending about 40 minutes on this, and take your time. So you're talking about maybe 2 minutes per multiple choice question. So the first one here is what's known as a cost schedule, and there are 3 questions associated with this particular question, this table. Right. So first question, total cost of producing 9 units of output. So we look for 9 units of output, which is here, and we want to find the total cost. So the options are 20, 30, 50, and 70. So I understand why he's coming up with 20 and 50 here. It's because of these two. But look at your heading, total fixed and total variable. You're asked to get the total cost, and the formula for the total cost equation is your fixed cost plus your variable cost. So your total cost is your 20 and your 50 added together. So in this question, your answer is D, 70 euro. Second question, when output increases from 4 to 9. So we're looking at output increases from 4 to 9. And that is known as additional output, or what's also known as marginal output. So the marginal cost of one of those 5 units is. So let's look at marginal cost in terms of your total cost. I'm going to show you Excel with that table in it. Actually, it might make it a little bit clearer for you. I could put in total cost here. Total cost is your fixed plus your variable. Was 20. Next one is 45, and your answer to question 1 was 70. So you'll see that happening here. There's your 70 total cost. So in question 2, what you're asked is to find out the marginal cost for one of these 5 units. So here's an increase of 5 units. So the marginal cost is the new total cost figure minus the previous one. So that's your marginal cost. It's costing us an additional 25 euro to produce those 5 units. Now, you're asked in the question to identify the marginal cost for one of those 5 units. So remember, 25 euro was for the 5 units. For one of those, we just divide that 25 by your 5. Again, 25 euro divided by your 5. And the 5, remember, that we got within that equation was the difference here. So it's 25 euro divided by your difference of 5 will get you the marginal cost for each of those units. So we're looking for 5 euro in our answer. And there we have it, answer C. Okay, question 6. Or sorry, question 3. The average fixed cost of producing 9 units per day. Okay, so what we have is, let's go back. The average fixed cost of producing 9 units per day. So 9 units per day is here. And we want to get the average fixed cost. So let's go back to our Excel file. So I'm just highlighting again my 9 units. I'll highlight that in red. So 9 units will give us a total fixed of 20 and a total variable of 50. Okay, so the question asks you to get average fixed cost. So here's your fixed cost. So we're just getting the average of these. So it's 20 divided by 9. I'll just do the calculation here. 20 divided by your 9. Remember your formula for average fixed cost or average any cost, variable cost, is your total cost divided by the output at that cost. So in that case, your average fixed cost is 20 divided by 9. So 2.22 I'm looking for in question 3. Yeah. Your answer is A for question 3, 222. Okay. Question 4. A firm's marginal cost. So recall, marginal means additional or extra. So we're looking at the extra cost here. And note that it's nothing to do with the table that we were just presented with. So this question is independent of the information you were presented with in the table. Now this requires a little bit of thinking and a little bit of calculation. So what we have here is your marginal cost of 30 euro. The average total cost 50. So I need to write these down, okay? I need to get my head around this and I'm going to put it all in Excel. So marginal cost is 30 and average total cost is 50. Marginal cost 30, average total cost 50. We also have output at 800 units. Okay. And you are asked in the question that the total cost of producing 801 units is one of these. Okay, so we have an additional or marginal output, so an extra 1 unit. So how much is that going to cost a firm with this information here? Okay. Now the key thing is to understand what marginal cost is. And if you're in any way inclined in understanding mathematics or differentiation in mathematics, where you got the first derivative of something, marginal is your first derivative. So we need to do work backward on that, and that's known as integration. And don't let those terms put you off, okay? All you have to do is to get the total cost function coming from marginal cost. Total cost will be your fixed cost plus your variable cost. And we understood that from the previous table in question 1. So if you were to get the first derivative of total cost, you have what's known as your marginal cost. And notice your fixed cost does not have any x associated with it. We could write this as given here by a quadratic equation. A being your fixed cost and B being your variable cost. Okay. So if we were to get the first derivative of this or differentiate this, A drops out of the equation and all you're left is the value of your B. And your B will become your marginal cost as such. So the marginal cost here will equal to B. And we're told in the question of marginal cost is 30. So let's work backwards and put 30 in where you have B. So that's for 30. Obviously, you get a chance later on to pause this and rewind and look back on it. So if I work backwards, my total cost now becomes A plus 30x. Okay, so A is your fixed cost. And let's go back to the question, see if there's any other information. Okay, we're told that average total cost is 50. Okay, so a little bit of maths going on here. Probably taken more than 2 minutes to do this. So we are told that your output is going to be 800 units. Okay. So if we multiply 30 by 8, multiply 30 by 800, we have 24,000. Okay. So we need to get what's known as your fixed cost. So a little calculation further to do is we need to identify what that average total cost is. And we're told the average total cost is 50. So again, I'm going to do another formula here for average total cost. Average total cost is total cost divided by your output Q. And we are told that you have an average total cost of 50. Bear with me now. Average total cost is 50 equals a total cost we don't know divided by your quantity, which we do know is 800. And we just simply bring your 800 back over here. So it'll be 800 multiplied by your 50. And that'll equal to your total cost. 8 by 50 is 40,000. Okay. So you can identify your fixed cost from this here. So let's work it out. And total cost is 40,000. That's equal to a fixed cost A plus 24,000. I hope I haven't lost you here, but again, it's a painstaking question to go through. To find your fixed cost, you bring your 24 over, it becomes negative. And that's equal to A. And subtracting that one from the other, you get 16,000. So fixed cost is 16,000. Now, we weren't asked to get fixed cost. What we were asked to get was the total cost of producing one extra unit. So at least we have a total cost of 40,000. That's what it is for 800 units. So for one extra unit, we have your equation. Your full equation is your total cost equals fixed cost of 16,000 plus your variable cost 30x. And we're going to put in 801 for your x. And we'll see that to be the final answer now. $40,030. Okay, so it's quite a long answer to get through. It's probably not worth spending all your time on it just for the 2 marks, to be honest. I probably take a guess on it because this is eating up a lot of time. So 40,030 is your answer for calculating the total cost for 801. So let's see, is that option there? So the only place I see it is between 40,000 and 40,050. Okay. Okay, let's it's not much maths left in this multiple choice question. So question 5 then. We are given a diagram and you're asked to identify which of these is your marginal cost curve. So I don't know if you recognize this type of diagram, but it looks like a diagram for a monopolistic or a monopoly. Okay. And what we have here, this is typically your U-shaped curve is your total average total cost curve. This is your average variable cost curve. This kind of J-shaped curve, that's your marginal cost curve. And this one is typically your marginal revenue curve or your demand curve. There's one missing here. But if this was given to you, the question could be asked, the average total cost curve is curve, and you identify curve B. The average variable cost curve is, and it's curve C. And the marginal revenue curve is D. But in this case, you're asked the marginal cost curve, and we identify that to be A. 6. Another diagram. Please note that these diagrams could come in use later on for other multiple choice questions or in long questions that you could be asked. So the average total cost curves for these 4 plants, A to D, shown in the figure. Which plant is best used to produce 60 units? Okay, let's look at 60 units here. And it's whatever 60 or this figure, whatever this figure hits off the bottom of the curve is the best one to use. So identify that curve. And that's belonging to plant B. So your answer here is B, plant B. If the question was asked, if the firm was to produce, say, 40 units, okay, your option, the best option would be to be plant A, because that's most efficient. Likewise, if it was 80 units, you're looking to produce with plant C. Okay, 7. Economies of scale. Okay. Now, economies of scale is usually associated with the long run. Here you have our previous diagram or question. This is to do with the long run average total cost curve of a firm. Okay. So this displays economies, diseconomies, and what's known as constant returns to scale. And I'm going to use this diagram to help explain what we mean by economies of scale in the next question. So economies of scale simply means that if you produce more units of output, okay, your average costs will fall. So you see here from this point where the cursor is, or we'll just say from point A all the way down to point E, is known as economies of scale. The firm actually reduces its average costs, average total cost, even though it's producing more units of output. But if it goes beyond 60 units to say 100 or 120, if it keeps on producing more output, well, then its average total cost curves start to rise from E to F and beyond. And that's called diseconomies of scale. In other words, as you produce more units of output, your average total cost rises. Constant returns to scale is just at that one fixed point at the very bottom of all of these. So the bottom point, which is point E. So again, this is economies of scale. This is constant returns to scale at E, and E to the right is your diseconomies of scale. In other words, average costs are rising as you produce more output. So let's see, is that answer in there? So economies of scale. No, we're not looking at marginal cost equal, no. The fact that in the long run, that's possible. I see the long run, fixed costs remain constant. No, that's your constant returns to scale. Well, it's not really actually, because that's fixed costs. That had average total costs, that'll be constant returns to scale. So that's not it. The range of output over which the long run average cost falls as output increases is correct. So your long run average costs fall as you produce more. That's economies of scale. So answer C. Okay, question 8. Looking at this table. Don't be put off by tables like this. They can be quite okay. So you have quantity of labor and your total product. Total product is also known as output. So using the data in table 2 above, labor is the only variable resource. What that means is you don't have any other variable costs like lighting or electricity and so on. It's just labor. If each worker is paid €42 per day, so that's their wage per day, what's the average variable cost to the firm of producing 122 units? So what we have to do straight away is look for 122 units in the table. Okay. So if output is at 122, that means you're employing 7 people. So what's the total wage? Well, the total wage is going to be 7 at €42 per person. And I'll do that in Excel. Just do it here. 7 by 42. Okay, so that's your total cost that's your total variable cost. €294 is how much it's costing you to employ the 7 people. But what the question's asking is the average variable cost of producing the 122 units. So what's the average cost per unit? And we have 122 units. The average cost is your total variable cost divided by the output that's being produced. So about $2 or €2.41. There, €2.41. Your answer is C. Okay, we're going into market structures here now. So there were 8 questions here on cost of production. Market structures, perfectly competitive firm. Question 9. Okay, the firm in the short run. We're looking for the shutdown point. Yeah, we saw a diagram earlier on, and it wasn't for a perfectly competitive firm, but it was for a monopoly or a monopolistic firm. And they also have a shutdown point. And the shutdown point occurs where the marginal cost curve, which is this curve A, the marginal cost curve hits the minimum of the average variable cost. That's known as your shutdown point. So that's the definition. The marginal cost curve hits the minimum of the average variable cost. So let's see if that's in there. So it is the level of output. So it's either A or B. The level of output which price equals the minimum average variable cost. Okay. And that's perfectly fine. Okay, so yeah, so your answer is A, the level of output at which price equals minimum average variable cost. And that's what I mean. Even though I said the marginal cost curve crosses the minimum of the average variable cost, price needs to come down to that level, and that's where the firm shuts down. So if we go back here to this previous diagram, for this particular firm, if this was the demand curve, that means this is the price, and the price is below the shutdown point, which means the firm shuts down. So your answer for question 9 is A, always the average variable cost. So these two, A and B, are fairly similar. Average total, average variable. It's always your average variable. Okay, 10. In the short run, a perfectly competitive firm can make, okay, they can make a normal profit in the short run. They can also with a supernormal, and they can also make an economic loss. But the emphasis here is on the word only. So they can do all 3. So your answer is none of the above. So that's a tricky question, to be honest, because you might tend to focus on one of these. Now, the question could also be changed, say, in the long run, a perfectly competitive firm can make, and the answer is only a normal profit if that was for the long run. But this is for the short run, which means all of these 3 scenarios can happen. But having only there emphasizes that that's not right. The answer is D. Again, the options could be a normal profit, a supernormal profit, an economic loss, or all of the above. And the answer would then be all of the above. Question 11. Okay, so this is good to see another diagram in here. Again, it could come in some use later on, and it's for a single price monopolist. Okay. It shows the demand and cost curves. Yeah. What economic profit does this firm earn? Okay, so what we need to do in order to find out economic profit is understand our formula. And the formula for profit is your total revenue minus your total costs. So we have to find your total cost and subtract that from your total revenue. So the formula for total cost here, we're going to take it being at the output, firstly, I have to emphasize this. We have to identify the number of units of output that this firm produces. So which of these units does the firm produce? Well, the understanding in economic theory for market structures is that the firm produces where MR equals MC. And there's your marginal revenue curve. Here's your marginal cost curve. And where they intersect, that indicates that this is the output. So the output is 20 firstly. So what's the price? Total revenue is priced by quantity. So we have our quantity. So total revenue is, we need our price. And the price is established at your demand curve. So we have a quantity of 20. Here's your demand curve. So we're going to go all the way up until it hits that demand curve here. So this is your price, 30 euro by 20. So that's 600. Okay, but that's an option, but it's not the correct one. That's only your total revenue. We have to look at costs. So here's your cost 20 at an output of 20. So here, look, it hits your average total cost curve here. So 20 by 20 is 400. And we subtract your costs from your revenue. So 600 minus 400 gives us an answer of $200. So again, it's important to know those relationships. Profit is equal to revenue minus costs. And you need to understand that the firm will produce where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. In this case, 20 units. Hits your demand curve here at 30 euro, but it hits the cost at 20 euro. And you're subtracting the sum of those. So 600 minus 400. Okay, question 12 then. A perfect price discriminator. What a price discriminator is, it's usually a monopolist. Any firm could really do it, but mainly monopoly. But a price discriminator is a company who can charge different prices for the same product. So they might get, say for example, Ryanair. If you're flying Ryanair, the person next to you in a seat could have paid a totally different price to what you actually paid for, and so too everyone else on the plane. So what they're trying to do is capture a lot of the what's known as the surplus that's out there. So charges the maximum price for each unit consumers are willing to pay. Yep. Answer is A. Okay. The reason why it's not all of the above is that the perfect price discriminator can earn an economic profit. Okay, a supernormal profit. So saying that they're unable to is wrong. So you can knock C and D out of there. Is able to get consumers to pay more each unit than they are willing to pay. No, a firm, an individual or a person has a maximum willingness to pay. And if they are not willing to pay more than that, they won't purchase the product. So the firm may know a person's willingness to pay and charge them the higher amounts. So your answer there is A. 13, okay. Which is false. So we have monopolistic competition. Remember, this is not monopoly, but it has some characteristics similar to perfect competition as well as oligopoly. So firstly, there are many firms. That's correct. That's a true statement for monopolistic. Firms sell a differentiated product. That also is true. Okay, that's why it's similar to oligopoly. And A, that's why it's similar to perfect competition. So they all sell differentiated products. There are no barriers to entry. That's also true. They are price takers because of product differentiation. That's false. Monopolistically competitive firms are actually price makers because of product differentiation. So having something like this again could throw you off because you may be aware that monopolistic competitors have differentiated products, but they're price makers. So this is a false statement. And again, just look out for this here. You could see this in a longer question on the same paper, and you could be asked to write about monopolistic competition. And here you have some of the characteristics of that particular firm. Okay, 14. Under the kink demand curve of oligopoly. Okay, I think it's a good idea to have a look at a diagram for this. So I'm just going to do a quick Google search. and see how that goes so we understand. Let's look at the options. Marginal cost is discontinuous, marginal revenue discontinuous, demand curve, or none of the above. Okay, so one of those is definitely discontinuous, but I want to show you the diagram and I want you to kind of point it out to yourselves before I actually give it the answer. Okay, go back out of that, sorry. Okay, so here we have a typical oligopoly with a kinked demand curve. And here, this is your demand curve, which has two states. This is what's known as elastic and this inelastic. Again, look out for that in your multiple choice questions. But here is your marginal revenue curve. And notice that's discontinuous. Your marginal cost curve isn't broken. So your answer is your marginal revenue curve. So let's take a look at this if we have it. The marginal revenue curve is discontinuous. Option B. Okay, 15, again, microstructures. Okay, a microstructure were a small number of producers. So you should know this is not monopolistic if you got the previous question correct, where you knew there were many firms. Also, perfect competition also has many firms. So straight away, you should be able to knock A and D as an option out of that. So a small number of producers compete against each other. Your answer is oligopolistic market because a monopoly is only one producer that has no competition. Okay. I'm not sure if you've done this, but this is known as, oh, sorry, it's not related to question 16. Okay, question 16, a cartel. Let me explain what a cartel is before we get to this. A cartel is a group of, say, companies who get together or producers who get together and agree with one another, also known as colluding. So they collude with one another to set a certain price based on output that they have. So they're agreeing on a set price to sell their products to the market, and they won't be competing with one another on prices, because if they start competing, they'll start knocking down prices and there'll be price wars or price competition. So they agree on setting prices based on their level of output. So let's see if that's in there. So a group of firms, yeah, agree to restrict output. Yeah. So your answer is A without even looking at the rest. If there was all of the above, I'd have to look at the others, but I could move on. I could be confident to move on this one. So table 3. Okay, again, I don't know if you come across this table here, but this is known as a payoff matrix, and it's related to oligopoly again. And typically what we're seeing here are two firms, 1 and 2, who are competing with one another in who will actually produce a small and a large car. And this is pretty much the profit. These are profits that the firms can make if they produce the small cars. So firm 2 produces a small car and so does firm 1. Each of them make a profit of 600. Whereas if both of them produce large cars, they're making less profit of 500. So what would they be better off doing? 600 looks quite tempting, because if the two of them agree with one another to make a small car, they will make €600 profit. Why would they produce large cars and only make €500 profit? So they could agree on this. But then would the firms trust each other? Because as we mentioned earlier, there's price competition and collusion is illegal. So a firm doesn't have to have a binding contract with another firm in order to keep prices or outputs at a certain level. So if both firms agree on producing a small car with a profit of €600 each, firm 2 could come along and start producing large cars instead. And as a result, they'll make €1,200 profit, and firm 1 will make only €900 profit on their small car. And likewise, if firm 1 decides to go against the collusion, they could produce a large car and firm 2 producing only a small car, and firm 1 could earn the €1,200 and firm 2 only €900. So there's a level of mistrust between these two firms. If they agree on the small cars, could one end up producing the large, making a higher profit? Or likewise, firm 1 could do that. So the overall strategy would be for them to actually produce the large cars, because with collusion, you don't have to trust. So let's see if any of that information here is in question 17. So it shows the payoff matrix, each contemplating making either a small or a large car. So which is true? Both firms are better off making small cars and competing head on. That seems quite logical to do this, compete head on, but then you don't have to trust, because firm 2 could produce a large car making this higher profit, and likewise firm 1. Both firms are better off making large cars and competing head on. Yeah. Even though they're making a less profit. Neither firm should make large cars. That's not true. Firms are better off if one makes large and the other makes small. That's true as well. One makes large, the other makes small. It makes sense for that to happen. But then firm 1, if they really want to make a large car, they're missing out on the potential €1,200. So why should firm 1 give firm 2 the higher profits? And they then might want to end up producing a large car. So essentially what happens is the solution will be they're both better off making it's a tricky one. I would say they're both better off making large cars. And the reason why that's the case is that one will end up might producing a small car and the other could still produce a large car, earning the higher profit. Okay, 18. Oh, almost there. So this figure here, fine, another figure. It shows a total product curve, also known as your output curve, total output. Here we have labor down on the bottom. And on the y-axis, we have, what's this, acres cut per day. So the more labor you employ, the more acres is being cut. So you see the output rises. And that's common sense. Okay, you employ more people, it gets more output, or more of the job is done. Okay. So assume the market for lawn cutting is perfectly competitive and the price of cutting a lawn is €50 per acre. Okay, so it's €50 per acre to cut. The marginal revenue product of the fifth worker. Okay, so here's your marginal revenue. The marginal revenue is shown here, or the marginal, if you just want to use the word marginal, this is point to point is your marginal, or anything additional. So we want to get the marginal revenue. It's important, again, like I mentioned earlier on, to understand the relationship and know how to get, firstly, your total revenue. So total revenue is priced by quantity. So let's look at the total revenue of the fourth worker. And this is important because we want to get the marginal revenue of the fifth, which means we get the marginal revenue of the fourth. Sorry, we get the total revenue of the fourth, the total revenue of the fifth, and take them away. Okay. The easiest thing to do actually is just see the difference here, 30 and 28. 30 is associated with the fifth person. 28 acres is associated with the fourth person. So the difference here is 2. Okay, so 2 times €50 is €100. So the answer is €100. But put it another way, total revenue 30 by €50, which is 1,500. 28 by €50 is 1,400. And 1,500 minus 1,400 is again your 100. So a simple way is subtract these two and multiply it by your €50. So we should have €100 as our answer. Yeah, C. Let me just ask it another way. What's the marginal revenue product of the second worker? Well, you just go from the first worker to second worker. So what's their output? The first worker's output is 10. The second worker's output is 18. So subtract those two, which is 8. And 8 times 50 is €400. So again, you can mess around with this and identify the extra or the marginal revenue product for each of these points. So question 19. could be argued that without government intervention, so here we have externalities and public goods. Without government intervention, so it's fill in the blanks. Okay, right. Okay, the reason why governments intervene is to try to knock pollution or reduce pollution or the amount of pollution, and to emphasize the social costs that a polluter imposes on society. So say, for example, if you are living near a factory that emits a lot of smoke on a daily basis, that's going to affect your health. And as a result, that's a social cost because you might have to pay for doctors' bills and so on. So the government, if they intervene, can identify this and sue or help penalize the firm by imposing taxes, for example. Now, I know taxes is in here, but that's not your answer. You will not have Pigouvian taxes in here. So your answer is going to be either one of these two. So it could be argued that without government intervention, only the benefits and not the marginal social costs are taken into account when firms are choosing the amount of pollution to emit. So that's without government intervention. With government intervention, they emphasize then the social costs. So your answer here is A. And last question, a good which is non-rival and non-excludable is termed, right? So we have a number of these here. Let me explain what it's not. It's not an externality. An externality is either going to be positive or negative. And an externality comes from the word external, which means outside of, say, your own personal environment. And your personal environment could be your own space or where your home is or something like that. So a positive externality is something that is done outside of your environment that directly affects you positively. And say, for example, of a positive externality could be you living next to a park, and a park is really well maintained, and it has a running track, and it has a lot of children's swings and slides and so on. So that's a positive externality to you. So you can freely use that public park. A negative externality, for example, is that previous reference I made with a firm beside your house emitting a lot of smoke and imposes negative costs on you, or negative externality. But anyway, I never use the word non-rival or non-excludable there. So your answer is not externality. It's going to be public or private goods. A private good is something that you personally own. Say, for example, you have purchased a milkshake. There's one straw and that milkshake is yours. Okay, so that means it's excludable. In other words, no one else should come along and start drinking your milkshake on you. Okay, I can't come along and put a straw in your milkshake and start drinking your milkshake on you. So that's a private good. A public good is something that we can share together. For example, that park. So if we have a public park that we could all go to, it's non-excludable. It doesn't exclude anyone from visiting that park, and it's also non-rivalrous. Okay, which almost means similar. So your answer for a good which is non-rival and non-excludable is a public good. And this question could also be asked in another way. A good which is rival and excludable is termed a private good. Okay, I really hope that all of this helped, and you get a lot from it. Let me see. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed that podcast or that webinar. And there are a lot of technical words being used here, and a lot of calculations. If calculations is not your thing, for example, that long question that we worked on, I think was question 4. Okay, just take a guess at it, to be honest. Try not to leave anything blank. And also, what else should I say? Try and find if you can't identify the correct solution straight off, try and identify what could be the wrong solution and eliminate those. So it's important to understand some of these questions as well for your long question. And if you find in your multiple choice questions possible uses of the options that are given in A to D. Use them in your long question as well. Anyway, I don't know if I'll get a chance to do another webinar, but if I do, I'll email you and let you know, and we might look at another past exam paper. Thanks very much for joining me. Anyway, it's been quite technical and obviously not a subject that you may not be passionate about, but it's compulsory in that you have an exam. All right, best of luck in the exam, by the way.